Welcome in to the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Blaine, Kellar, and Chris Yao joining you this week. And Chris, I think we found a recipe for success for these Tennessee Titans. In 2 of their 3 wins this season, our Titan insider Terry McCormick has been on the road with the team. First in Miami and now in Houston after a 32-27 win.
Yeah, has he seen all 3 victories, I guess?
Yes, he's seen.
Third one was at home,
in the building for all 3, yeah.
Now, that didn't help us in Buffalo, but
no.
That's okay.
The winning record's much better than when he's not there.
Yeah, so, absolutely. It's pretty impressive. Maybe we're going to have to send Terry on the road. The Titans may have to start paying for him at this point.
Take Terry to faraway lands, and the Titans will start winning games. But what a performance from Will Levis and these Titans against the division leader, Houston Texans, bitter rivals, and just really impressive across the board. Defense got a few takeaways. Levis outplayed C.J. Stroud. I can't say good things about the special teams.
I was going to say maybe not across the board, but
yeah, we'll take 2 out of the 3 phases. Most of the board was good.
Meatloaf said 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and certainly we'll take it because it's what's going to give us the win on Sunday. And this team is. It's funny because you and I were talking before about a certain local high school team that was always a play or 2 away. This Titans team is a play or 2 away from being 500.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple those games early in the season and in a couple of games, a couple weeks ago, it just that the Colts game, this team is just on the cusp. So if they can put it together on the second half of the season, this team, I don't know that they're looking at the playoffs because, obviously it's a long shot, but they may be really hurting their draft position.
Well, it's Overreaction Monday. We could say a playoff push could be on the horizon. We could say we could give a shout out to Springfield. Name that local high school that's really playing well to this point. Shout out to my alma mater there. We'll take a break here on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. When we come back, Main Street Media of Tennessee co-worker Wade Neely, also entertainment and fan engagement member of the Tennessee Titans. So we'll get a little bit of a glimpse inside and outside of the organization there. Glad to have him joining us on the other side of this break.
Being a part of a cooperative is being a part of something bigger. Farm Credit Mid-America is a customer-owned lender that specializes in agricultural financing for farm real estate, operating, and farm equipment. A unique benefit of being a part of the Farm Credit Mid-America Cooperative is our patronage program, which has put over $1 billion back in our customers' hands over the last 7 years. That's the power of a cooperative. Visit us at fcma.com to learn more.
I own the land.
I farm the land. Together we're farmers.
This is our cooperative.
Blaine Kellar, Chris Yao, and Pulaski native Wade Neely joining the show, the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Wade, you told me one half of the intro was your official role with the Titans. You wanted the other half to be Pulaski native. Thanks for joining us.
Proud Pulaski native, Giles County alum. Shout out to Springfield, though. That was a good what a fun story that has been just quickly in the high school ranks.
Yeah, we all have a little bit of our toes dipped in the high school ranks while also getting the opportunity to cover the Titans. So glad to touch on both of them on today's show. Wade, what surprised you most from Sunday's win for the Titans?
For me, the most surprising thing was just the way that Tennessee kind of seemingly absorbed a knockout blow, but responded on a number of different occasions. And it feels like in years past, even in games past this season, once you kind of crossed over, whether it was a certain point threshold or a certain momentum threshold in the second half, the Titans were done. And yesterday, wow, I mean, they just continued to surprise me, finding a way. That felt like an old, gritty, dare I say, Mike Vrabel type win where they just refused to lose and they found a way to get it done.
Yeah, that knockout blow that you mentioned, the Jimmy Ward pick six, where the Titans get another interception. I believe that one from Kenneth Murray. Then Will Levis kind of has another one of those costly mistakes that he was known to have at the beginning of the season. Jimmy Ward returns that for a touchdown, but then the Titans hang in, and it just felt like you said, all season long they've been a little bit away. They've been eluded by responding in that way. Here recently, they've been ever so close to it against Minnesota in the games before, but finally found what I dare call a breakthrough for Brian Callahan's first season.
Absolutely, and I was listening to you and Chris in the green room in the first segment, and I mean, this is a Titans team that a few plays and this season it looks totally different right now. And I know that's kind of cliche, and I know we like to always look back and say what if, but I mean that's the fact. I mean, go back to week 1 and you basically gift wrapped a loss to the Bears, and you're sitting there in the AFC South, which doesn't look necessarily winnable per se for the Titans, but it doesn't look losable as we saw yesterday.
Yeah, Will Levis was really, really good. I think, Chris, you wanted to touch on that a little bit, his performance yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, what has changed for Will Levis coming out of that injury. He's looked like a completely different guy. Sure, the pick six yesterday was vintage Will Levis in some ways. He stare down the receiver and just does what Will Levis has been known to do to this point. But outside of that, take that away. Last week, this week, he's played a completely different style of football, which has been a little less conservative, a little less worried about what he's going to do, that gunslinger mentality. And when Will Levis has that gunslinger mentality, this team succeeds long term. Is that the only thing that's changed? What's changed in his mindset? I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I will say is if you're going to have a quarterback like Will Levis back there, and I've said this kind of since week 2, week 3, when it seemed like they started dialing back the scheme for him a little bit. Will Levis, to Chris, to your point, he is who he is, right? I mean, he is a gunslinger, and he's going to get you in some bad situations, but he can also make some crazy throws. And you kind of just have to buy a ticket to the roller coaster, in my opinion. And when they schemed, it felt like they schemed back a little bit to keep him from making mistakes. And it just doesn't seem like Will Levis is not meant to be caged, folks. You don't need to let him be boxed in, because you kind of miss on those crazy plays. I saw this stat on social media yesterday. Over the last 3 weeks, he's had the most yardage of anybody in the league on 30-yard deep balls, 30 or more yard deep balls. And that includes the GOAT, Russell Wilson with those moon balls. So, I mean, Levis has been throwing the ball deep, which does get him into some problems. We can touch on that in a moment, I suppose, on the pass protection leading to some sacks. But that's kind of who he is. And the fact that he's being more aggressive and they're letting him be more aggressive, that's the guy you need to see to have any shot of finding out if he's any good, number one, or finding out if he's your guy, number two.
Wade, you touched on it there. I think the only gripe you can have with how Will Levis has played since returning from injury, and Chris, of course, the interception yesterday, still not a great mistake if there is such a thing, but the sacks, he's trying, and broadcast crews have commented on this week in, week out, he's trying to take the sacks to avoid making that back-breaking play, like one that happened in Chicago or one that happened against New York. He's taking those sacks to avoid something more horrible from happening. If you look at his play the last 3 games, 748 yards, 5 touchdowns. He has 20 sacks in that span as well, though. Not all of those on him, of course. This offensive line is going to be not great either way. But if Will Levis can take 20 sacks in 3 games and they can still come out with a quality win against Houston and taking 9 sacks in that game, I think you'll take it, considering the 60-yard bombs you get to Calvin Ridley and the 40-yard touchdown you get to NWI.
No, I don't think you're wrong. a lot of those sacks are Will's fault. I mean, you saw yesterday he stepped into one, right tackle's bad enough, and he just walked right into a sack behind the right tackle. But, yesterday took, you say 9 sacks. I had 8, but I don't remember.
8, 1 negated by a penalty. So
okay.
Houston should have had 9, but 1 called back.
So 8 sacks, gave up an 80-yard kickoff return, a pick 6, and fumbled a punt, and we won the game.
Crazy.
And that's absurd, but it also kind of, embodies the weekend that was in football all around, college and pro. I mean, the Dallas Commanders game was insane as well. And then
you want to talk about bad special teams.
The
Dallas
Chiefs
and
almost lost.
Woo.
Yeah, the Chiefs almost lost to the Panthers. I mean, it was just absurdity all around. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think, because as a fan watching the game, Titans are backed up at the 4-yard line. Then they throw in a pass to Pollard who goes backwards. And then I'm just sitting there going, okay, here it is. Here's another stupid Will Levis play. We're not going to get out of this. And yet he's not able to complete a pass, but doesn't do anything stupid. And I think that's what's changed, is like you said, Blaine, he's consciously making an effort not to do something, not to play hero ball.
Yeah, my thought is that if Mason Rudolph is in there or Will Levis is in there, one of those guys is going to get crunched on the right side either way. So are you going to – Mason Rudolph might throw it out of bounds a little bit more, but that pressure is going to come either way, and it showed yesterday. So I think Will Levis's mindset has maybe changed a little bit to where I'm not going to change the way I play, but instead of trying to play that hero ball when the pressure's coming, I'll just absorb the sack because my body will let me,
or
I guess.
Screw it, NWI's down there somewhere.
Yeah. Chris, you talked about it for a second, and I really want to get your guys' take on this. That first half, especially when you're watching those Titans drive, you mentioned the Titans late in the game being backed up and, kind of maybe inching toward that game-changing momentum play. Had drives start at the 11, at the 5, twice at their own 30. They were deep in their own territory time and time again, and they always found a way out of it. 89-yard drive for a touchdown, 95-yard touchdown drive. These aren't the Titans of the beginning of the season. If you started back there, there was the Jaquan Jackson mistake on not the fumble, but the return. That's another deep drive that still didn't result in the end of the game for this team.
For sure. And that kind of is where I sit with Levis is, yes, there is always the possibility of a mistake. And we've seen the mistakes when they're bad. They're obviously the worst kind of mistakes, but he has that upside to get you out of those crazy situations that in a game that is nip and tuck, in a league that's very, very close and everybody's so competitive, that sometimes is the difference. And with Levis back there, 3rd and 10, the odds are still against you, but it certainly doesn't feel like the death sentence that it has felt with other quarterbacks outside of a healthy and a great offensive line with Tannehill back there. It feels like on 3rd and 10, you actually at least have a chance and you're not just kind of conceding the drive already. And, there's not really a way to put that, I don't think, into how many wins does that equate to or what does that get you, but it certainly feels like having that chance is a step in the right direction. And that kind of speaks to, I think, the philosophy that the team and the organization kind of wanted coming into this season, is to find out if this new look would work, and at least it's given you a chance to do so.
And could I say that I think this philosophy is starting to change a little bit when you go through the team's really long, losing stretch outside of the New England win, which still looked the same. Mm-hmm. Brian Callahan said, we are a rushing football team. We have to let Tony Pollard rush us to a win. That was the case while Mason Rudolph was in, and in the early portions of Will Levis's return. That's the identity offensively that they embraced. Yesterday, Tony Pollard had 119 rushing yards, but Will Levis had just as many pass attempts as Pollard had rushes. He had 278 yards to Pollard's 119. Are we starting to see a shift at all in how this offense operates, you think?
No. You have to run the ball to be able to throw the ball.
I agree with that.
And I think that's and at least for this team, because you can't be in a situation where you're in a must pass situation. You can't be in an obvious passing situation. You always have to have the threat of Tony Pollard getting the football, or Tyjae Spears when he's healthy. You've got to have the ability to run it. And as long as Tony Pollard is doing Tony Pollard things, this team can be successful.
Yeah, I don't think the Titans are in a situation. I don't know many NFL teams that want to drop back and just throw, 50, 60 times a game. Having that in a perfect world, balance is key. So to Chris's point, I think, when you're able to run the ball, that makes you even more explosive, in my opinion. And the fact that the Titans are kind of – and also, I think there's probably still a small element of Chris's original point that yesterday was just kind of a weird day across the league. We saw some crazy scores. We saw some wild finishes. It just felt like yesterday was a little bit of bizarro world. But to the Titans' credit, it was to the good, and it felt nice. And I had a unique experience yesterday as I was watching the game partly. I was listening to the game, then I was watching it. I was kind of going back and forth as the game went on. And every time it felt like I didn't really have a great pulse on what was happening other than, man, they were still just really trying. At the end of the day, it was a division game too, which was very exciting to see that they still kind of had the chops against the presumed, division champs or the division powerhouse to go on the road and gut out a win like that. That was very impressive to see.
Our Titan insider, Terry McCormick, will be with us once we come back. We'll also give you our stat stuffers and stock report. You're watching the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Be back in a minute.
He shoots, and he scores!
This is Terry McCormick reporting from the NRG Stadium here in Houston, where the Titans came away with an improbable 32-27 victory over the AFC South leading Texans. The Titans took a 17-7 lead early as Will Levis was dealing in the ball game, completed his first 11 passes for 159 yards and a touchdown. And while that was impressive, that might not be the most impressive part of Levis's day for the Titans. The most impressive part of Levis's day for the Titans was his work after he threw a terrible pick six that Jimmy Ward returned 65 yards for a touchdown that handed Houston the lead in the third quarter. Earlier this season, when Levis had issues like that with turnovers and problems that, some were of his own making, you would see him not rise to the occasion, not rally, kind of fold the tent. But today he showed much more moxie, a lot of fight. He showed that he's learned some things since early in the season and since he's returned from a shoulder injury. I think what you're seeing out of him is a guy who's understanding the offense better. He's also more confident, and he's playing that way. I think the fact that he was able to find Chigakonkwo for a 70-yard catch and run that gave the Titans a lead and eventually the win, I think that was, a big step in the right direction for him. The other thing, too, with this Titans team, there's still, a lot of things that have to improve. The special teams is still terrible. They had an 80-yard kickoff return that set up a one-play touchdown drive for Houston on the opening series of the game. Jaquan Jackson had a critical fumbled punt that the Texans got a field goal out of, and he also had a questionable play catching the ball and trying to run with it on the 5-yard line that pinned the Titans deep in their own territory with the game hanging in the balance. So while it's a rough day for special teams, Levis in the offense, and then with a nice assist from the defense there at the end, getting pressure on C.J. Stroud, gave the Titans the win. The game ended on a safety sack by Harold Landry. A little bit of analysis here going further with Levis. Yes, he still takes way too many sacks. He had 8 in the game, but 7 of those came in the first half. So clearly he was a little better in the second half. Part of that I think you can attribute to the fact that when the Titans find themselves in obvious passing situations where it's 3rd and long or they're in the 2-minute offense, that's when a lot of the sacks seem to occur because they just cannot hold up when there is no element of guess on the defense's part that the play might be a run when they know it's a pass. And then the other thing, of course, Levis does still hold on to the ball too long at times, but those are things that are getting better. And certainly his play with how he is, operated this offense over the last 3 weeks and especially the last 2 weeks certainly is a step in the right direction. So for those who have written Will Levis off, and saying that he is not the guy, that he's not going to be what the Titans need at quarterback going forward, maybe time to start to rethink that just a little bit. The jury is still out, but at least for now, there's some progress and things are moving in the right direction. Over the last 3 games, he's completed 66.7% of his passes. That's 2/3 for 748 yards with 5 touchdowns and 2 picks. Has a 104.6 passer rating. That's winning football. If he can continue that, keep that up, get some help from his teammates, and they can cut down on the mistakes, maybe this Titans team will show some improvement over the course of the remaining 6 games of the season. This is Terry McCormick for the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast from Houston, where the Titans win 32-27.
Thanks to Terry McCormick for his update from Houston. And I'll kind of give one more closing thought on Will Levis and his increasing stock. Also going back to our topic on the maybe a philosophy change a little bit as Tennessee season continues. Will Levis, 11.5 yards per pass attempt yesterday. That's a season high. The week before was a season high, also 9.5 yards per attempt. And if you go back before that, we're looking closer to 7.6, 7.4 when he was healthy before the injury in Miami, 6.7 Wade yards per attempt. So it seems like maybe those opportunities to throw the ball a little deeper are opening up, and that's contributing to Will Levis's rising stock.
I think so. Yeah. If you are buying stock in Levis, it is climbing, I think, a little bit as we sit here on the Monday of Thanksgiving. And I'm not sure that a lot of folks, even last week or definitely a few weeks ago, would have thought his stock might have any chance to climb the rest of the season. His ability to make the deep ball, we've talked about it earlier on this show, that he can get you into some trouble, but when he gives you that playmaking, that ability to stretch the ball down the field, that's kind of that's his whole appeal. That's his whole makeup, if you will, in my mind. And that's good to see from him. I think he's definitely on the rise. And I find it kind of fascinating too. I mean, I know Sunday was an interesting day. We talked about a lot of crazy results, a lot of teams that maybe should have won, lost and whatnot, but seems like just a little bit of the national media was even giving Levis a little praise as well for taking those sacks and having a pretty good game outside of the one interception yesterday.
Chris, I think at one point you called Will Levis's stock and the Titans stock penny stocks. Are you buying any players at this point?
Here's what I think is impressive is to me, the biggest stock up over the last 2 weeks is the coaching staff. I don't know. I'm not going to take credit for it because of my rant or anything, but I couldn't have hurt. I mean, at some point they took a look in the mirror and said, okay, we've got to fix something. We're not doing what makes us successful before we got to Tennessee. How do we fix that? And I think whatever whatever changed, whether it was, maybe it was Traylon Burks, maybe it was NWI stepping in and taking those reps and Will Levis being comfortable with him. Who knows what it was, but the coaching staff has kind of given Will a chance to be Will. They've made a great adjustments at halftime. Even last week they didn't do great, but it wasn't the game that many of us expected to see against Minnesota. So I think the coaching staff stock right now is up, and that's pretty impressive.
Of course, can't be a Titans game without a few stock downs. Special teams unit, of course, as Terry mentioned, still.
Can they go any farther down?
Yeah, it's still bottoming out at the penny value there. Also, just briefly here, wanted to talk about Jerome Baker getting his first extended run at Titans linebacker. Also was stock down in my mind. I know there's a miscommunication on that first play after the big kickoff return. Again, that started the game, give the stock down to the special teams. But Jerome Baker was in coverage on that touchdown that went to Cade Stocker, I believe. He had illegal contact on third down, couldn't tackle Joe Mixon on a screen pass, despite having him pretty much wrapped up. And then in the fourth quarter, allowed a catch to Dalton Schultz in pass coverage. Kenneth Murray looked a little bit better than Jerome Baker did in pass coverage, which is saying quite a bit, considering Kenneth Murray is not a great pass cover.
You did say that Baker wrapped. If Baker doesn't do what he did to Mixon, that play could have gone much farther. So I'm not gonna kill him on that one, because he did at least throw him to the ground, even though Mixon got up and was able to keep going. But yeah, it was not a great start to his Tennessee Titans tenure. Now.
Yeah, Baker came over from Seattle after the Ernest Jones trade and now elevated to the starting lineup in place of the IR'd Jack Gibbons. Guys, let's get into our stat stuffers to close out the show. We've been talking about Jarvis Brownlee all year long, and his ability. This probably was his breakout game, so to speak. 3 pass deflections, interception, and a tackle for loss. He's the first Titan at that time not named Amani Hooker to have an interception on this defense. Also, Kenneth Murray came up with a pick as well. A couple of pass deflections for him, too. For a beat-up secondary, they weren't too bad against C.J. Stroud yesterday.
Yeah, Brownlee impressive. And this is a guy that, for all the talk about the offseason signings in the Titans secondary and the injury news at various points this season to that unit, it was nice to see Brownlee, who I think you got to be, pleasantly surprised. Don't, rush out. Don't rush out and build a bus for the Hall of Fame just yet by any means. But from considering where you got him and at this point in the season, that was a great performance yesterday.
Chris, who stuck out to you on the stat scores?
Honestly, NWI just continues to impress, and as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, and while he's on my fantasy bench, he probably will.
Yeah, I was surprised to see he's still a free agent in my league. I might have to put in the waiver claim this week. I think the guys in my league don't know ball like I do, but that's the league winner talking right now. Give a shout out to the ageless Nick Folk. About 3 50-yard field goals. I might be missing one. I think he had 3 yesterday. And in a day where special teams was so bizarre across the league, Nick Folk really put together another strong performance as a 40-year-old.
Yeah, Fairburn even missed that 30-yarder.
Yeah, the 28-yarder would have changed the complexion of the game, but Fairbairn missed on that one for Houston. 32-27, the final. The Titans win. See if they can make it 2 in a row against Washington. We'll have coverage all week on Titan Insider. We'll be back here next week on the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast.